You're standing on a shoreline in what will one day be called the Persian Gulf. The year is 10,800 BCE. For generations, your people have lived in stone cities along these coastal plains, tracking the stars with a precision that modern instruments will only match in the 20th century. You understand the precession of the equinoxes. You've mapped the great year, the 25,920-year cycle of the heavens. But today, the sky is a bruised, unnatural purple. The air tastes like copper. Suddenly, the horizon vanishes. A wall of water is moving toward you, faster than sound. In less than an hour, your temples, your libraries, your entire history will be pulled into the abyss. According to everything we are taught in school, you don't exist. You're supposed to be a primitive hunter-gatherer, wandering in furs, struggling to survive the end of the last ice age. Yet, here you are, witnessing the end of a world that history refuses to remember. The official story of human progress is a clean, straight line. We started as nomadic bands 200,000 years ago, invented agriculture 10,000 years ago, built our first cities in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago. It's a comfortable narrative. It's also increasingly impossible to reconcile with the physical evidence. What really happened 12,000 years ago is one of the most contested questions in modern science. And the reason it's contested isn't because the evidence is thin. It's because the evidence is everywhere. And it points to something the official timeline of human civilization cannot comfortably absorb. So let's go through it. Not the mythology, not the fringe theories, the peer-reviewed research, the ice cores, the impact craters, the sediment layers, the simultaneous extinction events on 4 continents. And then we'll talk about what it means that every surviving culture on Earth, from Mesopotamia to Mexico, from West Africa to the Pacific Islands, recorded the same catastrophe in the same sequence. Because the flood wasn't a myth. It was a news report from someone who survived. Before I go further, let me explain something, because this concept is the engine of everything that follows. The Younger Dryas. It's a geological period. It begins at 10,800 BCE and ends, abruptly, around 9,600 BCE, roughly 1,200 years of climate collapse, sandwiched between 2 otherwise stable warm periods. Here's what it is in plain language. The Earth was warming after the last glacial maximum. Ice sheets were retreating, sea levels were rising slowly, life was stabilizing. Then, almost instantaneously, in geological terms, the temperature in the North Atlantic dropped by somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. In decades, not centuries, decades. The glaciers stopped melting. Megafauna began dying on a scale not seen since the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs. In North America alone, 35 genera of large mammals went extinct inside a geological eye blink. Mammoths, mastodons, the American horse, the giant ground sloth. Gone. The Younger Dryas isn't a slow, predictable climate shift. It has the signature of an impact event. And in 2007, a team of 26 researchers, led by physicist Richard Firestone, published findings in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that changed this conversation permanently. They weren't looking for Atlantis. They were looking at the dirt. Specifically, a thin black layer in sediment deposits across 4 continents: North America, Europe, Western Asia, Syria. This layer, called the black mat, sits precisely at the Younger Dryas boundary, dated to 10,800 BCE. Below the layer, megafauna, human settlements, tool cultures. Above it, almost nothing. Inside the layer itself, nanodiamonds, microspherules, iridium anomalies, Lonsdaleite, a hexagonal diamond that forms only under extreme cosmic impact pressures and temperatures. These materials don't form on Earth through any known geological process. They form when a comet or asteroid detonates in or above the atmosphere. Now, here's the pushback I'd expect. I can already see the comment being typed right now. But if there was a major impact, where's the crater? I thought the same thing. For a long time, that was the argument that stalled this entire conversation. No crater, no impact. Hypothesis was shelved, disputed, ridiculed. Then, in 2018, a team led by Kurt Kjær from the Natural History Museum of Denmark announced the discovery of a 31-kilometer impact crater beneath the Hiawatha Glacier in northwest Greenland. Published in Science Advances, the crater is consistent with a kilometer-scale iron meteorite or comet fragment. The date range from initial analysis overlaps with the Younger Dryas boundary. Not one impact site, one confirmed so far, potentially more. Because the impact hypothesis doesn't require a single strike. Researchers, including Alan West and James Kennett, whose combined publications on this subject now exceed 40 peer-reviewed papers, have proposed a fragmented comet, a cluster of impact events spread across thousands of miles, hitting the massive Laurentide ice sheet that covered most of Canada and the northern United States. An ice sheet impact doesn't leave a conventional crater. The impactor hits ice, not rock. The ice vaporizes. The crater fills with meltwater and eventually disappears under sea level rise. The only record is chemical, and that chemical record is exactly what we find at the Younger Dryas boundary on 4 continents simultaneously. The impact alone may not have been the kill shot. What came next was, the black mat contains evidence of a continental-scale wildfire. Researcher Andrew Moore from Rochester Institute of Technology, working at a 12,000-year-old site in Syria called Abu Huraira, documented a thin layer of melted building materials, glass-like substances formed at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius, and burned grain stores. Published in Scientific Reports in 2020, the glass found at Abu Huraira matches samples found at nuclear weapons testing sites. Think about what that means. A Neolithic farming community in northern Syria experienced temperatures comparable to a nuclear detonation. Similar vitrified materials, stone and soil fused into glass by extreme heat, have been documented at sites across Scotland, Turkey, and the American Southwest, all dated to within the Younger Dryas window. If you're half listening to this while doing something else, I need you to actually look at the screen for this next part, because this is the piece that makes everything else make sense. Humans have always been a coastal species. 90% of our major cities today sit on or near a coastline. 12,000 years ago, during the last ice age, sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are today. Millions of square miles of fertile habitable land, what archaeologists call the coastal plains, were above water. When the ice sheets melted in a matter of weeks due to the impact, those plains didn't just flood. They were erased. Geologists confirm what they call meltwater pulse 1b. Around 11,600 years ago, the exact date Plato gave for the sinking of Atlantis, sea levels rose so rapidly it would have felt like the ocean was reclaiming the world in a single afternoon. If there was a global civilization 12,000 years ago, its greatest cities are currently sitting under 300 feet of salt water and 10 feet of silt. We aren't looking at the beginning of history. We're looking at the survivors trying to remember the end of it. Now I want to be upfront. I came into this with a position. I think the resistance to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis isn't really scientific. It's architectural. Because if you accept the impact as a civilization-ending event, you have to accept that there was a civilization to end. And that means rewriting every textbook, every documentary, every comfortable assumption about the linear march from primitive to advanced. I'll be honest, when I started building notes for this video, I was going to frame it around the question of whether an advanced civilization existed before the Younger Dryas. Present both sides. Let the viewer decide. Then, at about 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, I went back to the raw data from 3 sites, Göbekli Tepe, Gunung Padang, and the underwater formations off the coast of India, and the frame collapsed. The question isn't whether an advanced civilization existed. The question is what advanced actually means. You're standing on a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating a site shepherds had long avoided, believing it cursed. What he uncovered forced a complete revision of the Neolithic Revolution timeline. Radiocarbon dating places construction at 9,600 BCE, 11,600 years old. It predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It predates the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years. T-shaped limestone pillars reach 18 feet tall and weigh up to 20 tons each. The pillars feature intricate carvings, foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, over 200 animal reliefs carved with surgical precision. There is no evidence of habitation, no cooking fires, no dwellings. It's purely ceremonial. A temple built by people who supposedly hadn't invented civilization yet. The pillars show no signs of practice, no evolution from crude to refined. They appeared fully formed, as if the knowledge was already there. Astronomer Martin Sweatman from the University of Edinburgh argued in 2017 that Pillar 43, the Vulture Stone, may encode a date of approximately 10,900 BCE using stellar positions. In other words, someone built a monument to remember the impact. That's not the behavior of a culture inventing civilization. That's the behavior of a culture recording a catastrophe. Then, around 8,000 BCE, the entire complex was deliberately backfilled with thousands of tons of sediment. Someone buried the world's oldest temple on purpose. Were the survivors trying to preserve something or hide it? Göbekli Tepe isn't the beginning. It's the echo. From buried temples in Turkey, we descend beneath the waves to Japan. In 1987, a diver named Kihachiro Aratake was searching for hammerhead sharks off the coast of Yonaguni Island. Instead, he found massive stone terraces, perfectly straight edges, and what appeared to be staircases carved into the seabed 100 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura spent 15 years documenting the site. He found 90-degree angles, symmetrical staircases, stone blocks weighing up to 1,000 tons, and post holes drilled into underwater bedrock. Natural processes don't drill holes. If artificial, the monument had to be built when the area was above sea level, before the end of the last ice age. That means it predates known Japanese civilization by 8,000 years. Geologists argue it's natural sandstone shaped by tectonic fracturing. Sandstone breaks in straight lines, they say, but natural erosion doesn't explain identical step heights across multiple terraces. It doesn't explain the stone circle found nearby with standing pillars. Now cross the ocean to India. Ancient Hindu texts describe Dwarka as a magnificent city built by Lord Krishna, a place of golden gates and towering temples that sank into the sea after his death. For thousands of years, it was dismissed as mythology. Then, in 2000, India's National Institute of Ocean Technology picked up geometric patterns on the seabed 120 feet underwater in the Gulf of Khambat, stone walls, foundations, a grid pattern spanning 5 miles. A piece of fossilized wood pulled from the site dated to 7,500 BCE, published in Marine Archaeology in 2004. The Mahabharata describes Dwarka's port and its submersion by the sea. If it's myth with eerily accurate geological memory. Its submersion aligns perfectly with meltwater pulse 1b, How many other cities lie beneath the waves, erased from history, because we stopped looking where the shoreline used to be? Pick up one of the scattered stone blocks at Pumapunku in Bolivia, 12,800 feet above sea level, and you'll see something that shouldn't exist. Perfectly flat surfaces accurate to within 0.02 inches. Drill holes with diameters so uniform they look machine-made, interlocking H-blocks that fit together like components off a factory floor. These aren't rough-hewn stones. They are precision-engineered from andesite, one of the hardest stones on Earth. The people who made them supposedly had no writing system, no wheeled vehicles, and only bronze chisels. But bronze doesn't cut andesite. It's too soft. Experiments by engineers have failed to replicate this precision using copper tools and sand. Even the Incas, 500 years later, couldn't duplicate it. Their stonework at Sacsayhuaman is impressive but crude by comparison. The site shows signs of catastrophic destruction, massive stones scattered as if by violent force. If the geological erosion analysis is correct, the site could predate the accepted timeline by 10,000 years, placing it before the flood. Could Pumapunku be the remnant of a technologically advanced culture destroyed by cataclysm? Could the Tiwanaku people have found these stones and built around them, inheriting a legacy they couldn't replicate? Each age inherits ruins it cannot duplicate. The Romans were master builders, aqueducts, amphitheaters, roads that lasted 2 millennia. But when they arrived at Baalbek in Lebanon to build the Temple of Jupiter, they found something that stopped them cold. A platform made of stone so massive, so perfectly fitted, that even Rome couldn't explain them. They built their temple on top. They never moved the foundation. The trilithon consists of 3 limestone blocks, each weighing approximately 800 tons. They are raised 30 feet above ground level. In the quarry, half a mile away, lies a 4th stone, the Forgotten Stone, discovered in 2014, weighing an estimated 1,650 tons. The math for moving these by human labor alone requires 40,000 workers in perfect coordination across uneven terrain. And if the Romans did it, why didn't they record it? Roman historians documented every major engineering achievement: Trajan's Column, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, all celebrated in stone and text. About Baalbek's foundation, there is only silence. Some researchers propose the megalithic platform predates all known civilizations in the region, built by a pre-flood culture with advanced knowledge of physics now lost to history. The Roman temple may have been constructed atop a much older sacred site, revered but not understood, even by Rome's finest engineers. Now, I want to go back to something I said at the beginning, because I think I framed it wrong. I said the question is what advanced means, but there's something more precise underneath that. The evidence from Göbekli Tepe, Pumapunku, and Baalbek doesn't just show technical sophistication. It shows inherited sophistication, knowledge that appeared without practice, precision that subsequent cultures couldn't match despite centuries of trying. That's not convergent evolution. That's transmission. Something was passed forward through the catastrophe, not intact, not complete, but enough. Encoded in stone, because stone survives what paper and memory cannot. Consider what we know about the survivors. The Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh predates Genesis by at least 1,000 years and contains the same story. A god instructs a man to build a vessel. The waters rise. Civilization is destroyed. The vessel lands on a mountain. The survivor sends out birds to find dry land. The Vedic tradition of Manu, the Greek Deucalion, the Aztec legend of the 5th son destroyed by flood, the Norse Bergelmir, Chinese records of a great flood survived by a single family, West African Yoruba flood narratives, Pacific island cultures across Polynesia and Micronesia preserving stories with specific details about stars going dark and the sea rising without warning. The mainstream explanation is convergent evolution. Humans everywhere, given enough time, develop flood mythology because floods are locally common and psychologically terrifying. Here's where I land on that. Convergent evolution explains similar themes. It doesn't explain identical sequences. The warning before the flood, the instruction to preserve knowledge or life, the landing on elevated ground, the testing of the waters, the birds. These specific, sequential, operational details don't emerge independently from local riverine flooding. They're instructions. They read like survival notes from someone who watched a civilization end and needed to make sure the next one knew it had happened. I don't know where you're watching this. Maybe it's late. Maybe you're supposed to be doing something else. But if you've made it this far, I think you already know why this question won't let you go. Because the pattern is undeniable. The gods of ancient mythology, Osiris, Quetzalcoatl, Oannes the fishman of Sumeria, share the same character arc. They arrive from the sea after a great cataclysm. They don't arrive as conquerors. They arrive as teachers. They bring agriculture, law, and the calendar. What if they were simply the survivors of the global civilization, trying to restart the clock? What if Göbekli Tepe is a time capsule? What if the reason it was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE is because the builders wanted to protect it from whatever came next? Not just one catastrophe, but the slow erosion of memory itself? The burial preserved it for 11,000 years. It worked. And here is the part of this that I find genuinely difficult to sit with. The reason the sacred geometry of ancient sites from Egypt to Cambodia to Peru shares the same mathematical ratios isn't necessarily because those cultures were in contact with each other. It's because they were working from the same textbook. A textbook written before the flood. We assume progress moves in one direction, from primitive to advanced. But what the evidence suggests is something more uncomfortable. That history is cyclical. That civilizations rise, reach sophistication, and can be erased so completely that the next cycle spends centuries arguing they never existed. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is not a fringe theory. It has been published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, in scientific reports, in Science Advances. The scientists arguing for it are from Oxford, UC Santa Barbara, Kansas University, the Natural History Museum of Denmark. The debate is live and genuine. Not every element of the original 2007 findings has been cleanly replicated, and I want to be honest about that. But here is what no one disputes. The Younger Dryas boundary is real. The mass extinctions are real. The simultaneous cultural collapse across North America is real. The meltwater pulse is real. The black mat on 4 continents is real. Something happened at 10,800 BCE with global consequences. The argument is only about mechanism, and the impact mechanism currently has the most physical evidence, the most institutional credibility, and the most explanatory power for what we find at every anomalous archaeological site on this planet. We are a species with amnesia. We are sitting in the ruins of a civilization that was erased so thoroughly that we spent a century arguing it never existed. The sites that survived, Göbekli Tepe, Pumapunku, Baalbek, Yonaguni, Dwarka, survived because they were built in stone, on high ground, by people who understood that memory is fragile and catastrophe is patient. If we were hit by a comet tomorrow, what would be left of us in 10,000 years? Not our hard drives, not our steel towers, only what we carved into stone. What are we currently leaving behind? That question doesn't have an answer I can give you. It's the question that belongs to you. The one I keep coming back to is this. If a civilization sophisticated enough to build global maritime networks, track astronomical cycles across centuries, and construct monuments that have outlasted every empire since. If that civilization was erased so completely that we spent 100 years arguing, it never existed. What does that tell us about ours? The flood happened once. The evidence says the mechanism that caused it hasn't gone anywhere. This channel isn't for people who want the comfortable version of history. It's for people who'd rather be uncomfortably right than comfortably wrong. If that's you, subscribe. We go this deep every single week. Hit like if something in this video shifted the frame, not as a favor, as a signal that this question deserves to stay in circulation. Save this one. The next time someone tells you civilization began 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, you'll want the Younger Dryas boundary, the black mat evidence, and Meltwater Pulse 1b as reference points. Your saved videos are in your library. There's someone in your life who already suspects the official timeline is incomplete. Who's felt the cracks without being able to name them? Send them this. The question this video deliberately leaves open, the one I couldn't resolve in 4,000 words, is about what was specifically preserved and transmitted through the catastrophe. The astronomical knowledge encoded at Göbekli Tepe. The mathematical principles embedded in megalithic alignments across 5 continents. The engineering techniques that appeared without precedent and that no subsequent culture could replicate. Where exactly did that knowledge come from, and how much of it survived in forms we haven't yet recognized? That video is already built. It's waiting. Drop a comment with the site or piece of evidence that hit hardest for you, or tell me where you think the argument breaks down. The fault lines in this debate are exactly where the next video lives. And I rid everyone,